Sorry, folks online, we were muted there for a minute, but Warren, Chair Gebert said he would allow comments on the Allen Boulevard site. Nobody present wanted to, but if there's somebody online.
Not gonna guess we just started with the.
We do have a couple of comments.
Okay, what?
Shocking ending. I wasn't ready for that.
I don't know.
Go ahead.
Doc, do you have some comments to make?
Yeah,
Okay,
my name is Chuck Don and I have been retained by the World Neighborhood Association to do a review of the stormwater plan dated October 30th, 5 years back then. And I have reviewed it. I have a number of comments that I have been put into your packet. Some of these may be real minor comments. They can be easily remedied. Some of them might not be. And I guess I would welcome the opportunity to sit down with Eric, assistant city engineer, Andrew, and also Elliot, maybe from the county, to work through each one of these items to determine to remedy them, to address each one of those.
okay.
I do. Oh, me? Okay. Dan Baruch, 6203 Lakeview Boulevard. Wanted to make sure that if you do consider fees in lieu for the Allen Boulevard site, that you keep in mind that in this stormwater ordinance is written that if fees in lieu are accepted, there needs to be management facilities downstream between the site and where the outflow is into the sensitive body water. And given the proximity of the site to Lake Mendota, I don't really understand how that could potentially happen. So just wanted to raise that issue.
I think that might apply to rate control, Warren, but not infiltration.
We don't have to address it now, do we?
We don't.
No. If you want to look at it during the course of the meeting and find out.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of stuck with my
Yeah.
computer being
Right,
just a
can't do that.
computer.
Any other comments? Okay, if not, then we'll go to presentation by the engineer.
Sounds good. I guess I'll start off by thanking everybody here for giving me the opportunity to kind of run you through our stormwater management plan we have here. Most of you are probably familiar with the site, but it's at the intersection of Allen Boulevard and Mendota Avenue. There's a group CSM yet to be recorded. That would divide the property into 4 parcels. 2 eastern parcels are lower density, western parcels are a higher density. And we've heard many comments, listened to many comments, concerns from this commission as well as the neighborhood association. We have put together an extensive, thoughtful and detailed stormwater management plan for the site to try to meet and exceed the requirements for the property. We've also had many discussions and meetings with city staff, Dane County, and DNR staff to make sure that everything we're proposing here is part of the technical standards and is to the maximum extent practical for this parcel. I know one of the concerns when this property was discussed previously was with impervious surface ratios. I know maybe you guys wanted to see zoning code to be a little bit lower than what it ended up being. We're certainly not pushing that envelope. Final impervious surface ratio is about 10% less than what would be allowed per the zoning code. So we're certainly not trying to push the envelope there. We've also dedicated a large portion of this property to stormwater management to make sure that we're doing everything in our power to protect downstream bodies of water. Typical site development in this community would commit 10 to 12% of the site to stormwater management. We're over 20%. And that's a large mix of different practices: bioretention, dry detention, wet detention, permeable pavement, green roof, and grass paver systems. Typically, when you request a infiltration exemption or recharge exemption, Dane County would require you to provide at least 2% of the site to infiltrative practices. We're almost 9%. Quite a bit above that minimum standard. Like I said, we're trying to do as much as we can. From a peak flow perspective, we have a lot of storage on the site that we've provided. There is a small area, the frontage along Middleton Beach Road. It's very difficult to capture. That strip of land by itself for the 1 and potentially 2-year event, depending on how these curve numbers shake out, produces more runoff than the entire site could be allowed to generate. Like I said, we're not able to capture that and detain it easily. And so that's why we are requesting exemption on those small event stormwater events. For the larger events, 5, 10, 25, 100, 200-year event, we're meeting those requirements and exceeding them in some cases, especially the larger events. We've also looked at the overland flow routes out of this site, and we are decreasing that overland flow route from what is existing now. We've also worked with staff. This soils condition of this property is different than a lot of sites. It's originally a Houghton muck, which could be identified as a D soil. But somewhere in the 40s, 50s, or maybe before that, it was filled in with a loamy texture soil, sand, silt. Because of that, those texture soils would produce less runoff in the pre-settlement condition. And so we've worked with staff to use that runoff coefficient to make sure that we're providing the most conservative peak flow analysis for the site. Even with those fill soils, we're still somewhere, it's split between B, C, and D. But we're going to use that B to make sure that we're giving the most conservative analysis of the property. There's a number of comments provided by Chuck Nahn. We've gone through all of them individually. I have specific answers to all those comments. If there's a specific one that we'd like to discuss here tonight, I'm happy to provide feedback on all of those. Going through all of them and looking at the modeling, none of them will change the overall results or require us to ask for additional fees and lieu.
Hang on, you gotta leave that open. Thank you.
And I hope that you guys agree and see that we have put a great deal of time and effort into making sure that we're not causing any downstream issues and that we are doing well above the maximum extent practical for this property.
What is the fees in lieu calculation, Eric? Have you had a chance to finish that?
No, and I did not include that in the agenda packets because it'll change, but Drew, can you share the components of that number?
I can, yeah.
Well, before we get started in this discussion, we've had a lot of comments from the neighborhood, and we discussed this at preceding meetings, and so I put together a statement that I'll like to read. As I stated in the previous meetings about this site, this is a sensitive area due to its proximity to Lake Mendota. My 3 concerns are increased runoff, rain, lack of infiltration, salt runoff in the parking lots. The present plan increases the impervious area by 67%, which affects all three of these concerns. Runoff volume control has been an issue that I have addressed in a presentation to WRMC several years ago. It's an issue that's not covered in our stormwater ordinance. I have made a recommendation for runoff control in a draft that I submitted for revising the ordinance. Reducing runoff volume is especially important in the Lake Mendota watershed because of flooding problems that we are experiencing in the lake due to high water levels. Annual runoff can be estimated by the equation runoff is equal to precipitation minus evapotranspiration plus or minus groundwater outflow inflow. In this area, annual precipitation is 35 inches and the annual runoff for the area is 12 inches based on analysis of streamflow records at USGS gauging stations in the area. Using this runoff equation, the ET is calculated to be 23 inches, which is a major part of the water budget. With present conditions using ET of 23 inches, the annual runoff would be 12 inches. With a proposed development, the ET would be reduced by 67% due to the increase in impervious area. The annual runoff would increase to 20 inches or a 67% increase. The proposed development infiltration would infiltrate 52% of the required 90% pre-development infiltration, which would reduce the increase in runoff volume to somewhere between 35–40%. Meeting the infiltration requirement is important since it helps reduce the total inflow into the lake by evapotranspiration due to green infrastructure. In addition, water that infiltrates into the groundwater system through porous pavement would eventually discharge to Lake Mendota, but a significant time delay because of the significant time delay versus direct discharge, thus allowing lake levels to recede before it effects are felt. The infiltration of water by porous pavement will also help reduce the salt load into the lake by dissolved salt bonding with the soil. Based on these concerns, I recommend that we don't approve fees in lieu of at this time, but suggest the developer work with the city to increase the proposed infiltration to meet the required infiltration by the stormwater ordinance. So open up for discussion.
I'll comment first, I guess. Everybody's got an opinion, I'm guessing. I don't doubt that for the particular site plan laid out here in the proposed development that from a technical point of view, all the practices that have been outlined and designed are to the maximum extent practicable. But I do agree with Warren and your point of view that this is just not a site where I want to allow a fee in lieu of. I think it's just got too many issues to allow development that would result in the increase that we're talking about here. So anyway, my bottom line, my opinion is I would not want to approve a fee in lieu.
Is there any other comments?
Yeah, I agree with on the fee in lieu, and this is why I've been asking to have for us to discuss the whole procedure and so on. Since I'm fairly new on the committee, I'm not sort of aware of all the little fine points, but I do have clear memories of a project a couple of years ago that fees in lieu of were granted up on Pleasant View Road, where Water Resources Committee left in extreme anger because they had to grant them. And I think we need to there are sites in the city where fees in lieu of shouldn't be allowed because it's just not a project, or at least where the proposed stormwater management practices, I'm not convinced this is going to really solve the problems. If anything, make it worse.
I don't have an opinion on the fees in lieu. I see that the county and our staff have recommended approval of the fees in lieu request, and I would like to hear the rationale there. If fees in lieu are allowed in some cases and not in others, I think we need to have a really good reason, like a documentable reason for granting it in some instances and not in others. So I would just throw that out there. I'm curious, like, well, if we're talking about fees and lieu first, I can hold off on my other comments, but I did have some comments about the design and the pervious versus impervious surfaces.
You're absolutely right, but if we do not have concrete reasoning for what we're going to do as far as fees in lieu of, we are probably opening ourselves up to some conflict, some fashion, and I don't know what that'll be, but I don't really want water resources to be storming out. Feeling like we've been trampled on. I think we need to try to come up with a good reason for really what we're gonna do, whatever that is.
I'll go along with all the comments so far. It's difficult to approve fees in lieu here and yet said the fact that the county seems to think it's okay.
The county approved fees in lieu or just said the stormwater calculations are correct, you meet all the requirements except for this.
Right.
That's all. They don't say,
Fees in lieu are particular
It's a
to the Middleton ordinance.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what I put up on the screen is a section of chapter 26. You know, we're talking about the infiltration and recharge performance standards. You know, and this is, we list this as prohibitions, and these are all the areas where we don't want to infiltrate water. So what's applicable here are these soil condition restrictions, less than 3 feet of separation distance to high groundwater, bedrock. And then there's another one with 5 foot of difference depending on the soil characteristics, and that's what the site's not meeting. I think fees in lieu just kind of sounds bad, and when the public reads that, they think we're just give us money and you can get out of your requirements. That's not the way I see this. If we were in Verona or Sauk County or somewhere that doesn't have a fees in lieu standard, the site would still be exempt from infiltration due to the poor soils, but they wouldn't be paying any kind of fee in lieu.
When we had Greg Freeze here, the ordinance and talked about Madison, I believe they don't have fees in lieu of. And we asked Greg how they handled it. And he said it was a discussion between the city engineering staff and the developer to meet the requirements, and they had a give and take type of procedure that they use. And that seems to make some sense. So it gets rid of this feeling that we're just giving away something. And I guess that's what I recommend in here. We don't use fees in lieu of, but have the developer sit down with you and staff and find a way to come closer to meeting our requirement.
I think the intent in the 3 years that I've been here is the developer makes a fees in lieu request, and then it has to come before this commission. And it's for the commission to decide if they feel the developer has maximized the infiltration. So this is similar to other ones where the fees they've calculated aren't based on infiltration, they're based on recharge. You guys could come and say, we want more green practices of some sort. We want more green roofs. That won't affect the recharge number, but it could theoretically lower the infiltration number purely through evapotranspiration.
well, I mean, the other option is always, I know this is not very economically acceptable, but you come up with a different site design that doesn't have this level of imperviousness that we're talking about. Here you back off or something. I know there's parking requirements and all kinds of stuff like that, but it's all a matter of what size building and footprint and driveways. Parking areas. So there's another way to come at this, is just reducing the imperviousness.
Yes.
And yes, that may not mean as much financial benefit. I don't know the answer.
Well, and that kind of tees up some questions I had about the design itself. Eric, can we go back to? So I'm looking at page 62. Active. Okay, yep, and if you could zoom in so that it's like a good. Much bigger than that. I had a question, so in the plan commission, our recommendation for one of the policy questions was to get rid of the perpendicular parking. And I see that, I think when I participated in that discussion, I pictured the parking going away and not necessarily being replaced with parallel parking. But it looks like, so are you planning to take that out or have?
What's shown here is to replace the perpendicular with parallel. That's what we gathered from that plan commission meeting. We're not using that parking for any parking requirements. We have no preference on whether it stays or go. That's up to the city. We're gonna be doing work there, so if you want parallel, we're happy to make that replacement.
Are you talking about on the road right away? Is that what we're talking?
Yep.
Right now, there's this parallel or the perpendicular parking for soccer games and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
But the question that came before the plan commission was, do we need to keep that now that there's going to be on-site parking and not soccer games? And we were inclined to say, no, get rid of the parking. So it seems like that's it. I don't know if that's considered the right of way or if that's part
Yeah,
of.
That's right away.
It's right away, right?
I had heard that the intent was for some kind of first floor retail. And that was the desire to keep some amount of parking.
Well, but isn't there going to be parking for the commercial on site? So that's not needed. And then the pavement on, well, in front of the apartments, did you want the parking there?
We don't need it. No, we're open to whatever city and neighborhood would like to do there.
There's no underground parking right now
There is underground parking on all buildings. Yep.
on the townhouses too, or just,
The townhouses are at grade in the garage. They're not true underground. It's first floor. But it's
Under building.
Under building.
Under building, not underground.
if we're talking about underground parking, I guess I would have concern about how much pumping is going to be.
It's not underground. that's what I'm saying. It's not exactly underground.
Yeah, it's first floor.
Yeah, he's saying if it were, you'd have.
Ground level. On the townhouses.
Townhouses,
But
yep,
still gonna have parking for guests. Is that correct?
for the townhouses.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what the exterior parking would be for.
So tonight we're just concerned about the townhouses, not the whole other.
No, the stormwater plan is for the whole development. In the past, we've seen partial plans brought before committees and they don't like that because it just leaves the door open. So we're presenting a plan for the entire site that shows a potential future development. It's in line with the original plan that we had submitted for the site, but reduced to meet the zoning length requirement. It's probably pretty close to what the final design will be, but we don't have architectural designs for it, so that's why we're saying it's not final at this point for the building layout, but the rest of the site will generally follow this layout.
So we won't see this again. This after it goes through, when the second phase comes in.
Drew will need to give us a phase one stormwater plan.
Right.
And then for this, but we asked and he provided the overall plan. And then during phase two, he'll have to do it again. You know, what's changed, we know it won't end up exactly like this, so there will be revisions, but yeah, he'll need 2 stormwater permits. Right now, all I was asking for was your consideration of fees in lieu and the overall design.
So to calculate fees in lieu on the overall design phase, is it 2 phases, 1 and 2?
It might be
3?
3.
All right, so whatever number of phases, you'd have to have a pretty good idea what exactly phase 2 and 3 are gonna look like to do the math, right?
Right.
Okay,
We could adjust it.
And the plan we're showing
Second
now
phase.
okay,
is most likely the most impervious we would propose.
Okay.
Likely those buildings will get smaller, but
So,
Can I just I'm sorry, I just want to clarify one more thing. On that parallel parking that Lisa referred to on the street, that is not even part of our runoff calculation requirements. They're outside the
Correct.
property boundary, right? So that's not even
That is
an issue.
to be decided because, you know, as this is shown, there is a reduction in impervious. Even though it's within the street right away. Same thing would happen over here.
And the sidewalk too, one of the comments I thought from engineering was that
Right.
that sidewalk should go
So
around.
we would prefer to have this sidewalk placed into the right of way. So when I said in my memo to you guys, I have numerous comments, they are details
Yeah.
similar to what Chuck Knott provided, you know, which is probably too much for this committee to get into.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things still in play here with the land division, with what happens within the right of way. It's, you know, to me, it's all part of the same design. If we're adjusting
Some part of the
how
design.
we treat what's their impervious, what's our impervious, what they're responsible for,
What the ordinance requires.
that gets pretty
Mhm.
tricky. But, you know, I think I've expressed my main concern with this site is what happens to the receiving storm sewer.
Yeah.
You know, Middleton Beach Road is gonna act as a dam after you get above a certain storm event. And there's no real good way to fix that at this point. So this needs to be the point of comparison, is what's happening along Middleton Beach Road.
Right
And
now,
making sure we're not exceeding what's happening now with storm flows, flood flows.
because there are no culverts under Middleton Road.
Well, there's a culvert through here
goes to the lake.
and maybe if you'll indulge me. This is a map I prepared a couple of years ago. This site is right here. Right. Each one of these little nubs is a storm pipe. So we've got one right along the edge of Marshall Park. We've got one that comes down Mendota. And that's got the smallest watershed associated with it. You know, and then the biggest one is a pair of twin pipes that come through right here, kind of opposite of Maywood. You know, so it's what's happening with this watershed, and that's the concern.
You can't enlarge that culvert that's the upper end of that.
We don't have enough space to do hardly anything at all.
I assume
You mentioned to me that the 200-year flood, actually shows an increase. Is that right?
I think I might have said that the design Drew provided still shows slight increases at the point where I want to make the comparison, which is the 30-inch pipe right before it passes underneath Middleton Beach. Right here.
You know, and I think using the present 100-year flood calculation, we've already realized that probably is not accurate because they're using rainfall data. It's probably going to be outdated. And the 200-year flood is probably more like the 100-year flood.
Well, we're required to go up to the 200-year now, because that's what the county ordinance says. So we have to follow that too.
So that's a concern that can't be rectified with this plan. I mean, you have a concern, which is a real one for them.
Right, and that'll be rectified before this gets through.
Okay,
But there, you know, it's
Meaning-
more complicated than
Meaning they'll have
it's.
to find storage somewhere to make that peak flow match the.
Yeah, they need to be under the peak, the existing peak flow with their proposed peak flow in a 200-year event.
so the only way to do that is to increase the storage in this site. Or open up
Yeah.
a culvert downstream.
Correct.
aren't you matching 200-year event?
I was gonna say, Eric, can you show us where in the packet?
I
Cause I thought it was all but the 1-year storm.
But 1 year's a problem too.
And that you had said, Eric, with some of the changes you were gonna suggest,
Well-
possibly the 2 year.
Yeah, we're talking about two different points of comparison.
Okay.
I have this bookmark for that in this version.
Page 4, yeah, you're at.
So I think, and Drew, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, the depression represents that point of comparison that I'm
Correct, yeah.
talking. Oh, well, I stand corrected. He is underneath it.
Yeah.
But that is only what's overtopping.
That's the overflow line.
That's the
The
secondary.
total discharge is what's coming pipe and overflow, and that is also decreased in the 100, 200 year. And
Okay,
everything
stand
going on.
corrected.
Where's the overflow point?
The overflow point that I found is a couple of lots south of Mendota Avenue.
It's very flat in there. It's either directly over that storm pipe or it's a couple of lots south of that storm pipe.
Yeah, and if it really, there could be multiple overflows. We could try to shunt some water across Mendota and push it into the wetland. There would be impacts to that.
Yes.
Pipes that exist up, I assume are pretty much flat pipes, right? They're not grade to them or not much.
Correct, and they're all partially submerged, no matter what the lake condition is, so.
So it's not
Fully
even-
submerged, I think, when it's at flood elevation.
How do you get water through it? It's full of-
You have to pile the water higher
Yeah.
on the upstream end.
We were sent pictures of like one of the residents on Milton Beach Road flooding that occurred this summer.
Yeah.
Was that overflow Milton Beach Road at that time or just ponded on the soccer field?
One of the emails I forwarded to you guys, yes, the resident was talking about overlapping through between his house and the neighbors. This set of pictures is primarily this is the west side of Middleton Beach Road in the tree line, and it's a poorly drained ditch. We cannot solve all the problems on Middleton Beach Road, certainly not with this project.
Oh, we don't want to make it worse.
Exactly. That's the intent, is to not make it worse.
So I think the report shows that we're matching or improving conditions for all those peak flow events except for the smallest of storms. And the only reason that we cannot meet those is because of that small area that we're not able to capture. Because it's directly coming out to the road.
You're improving it because of the storage basins that are
Yeah.
planned.
Yeah, the extensive storage basins. Like I said, 20% of the site is committed to stormwater management.
What kind of landscaping will you have?
Um,
Because I know the chair was talking about evapotranspiration, and I think your calculations assume that anything that's not impervious would be lawn.
Right.
Right.
yeah, we have an extensive landscape plan. Landscape architect loves using perennials and trees and shrubs.
What about native plants?
Yep, lots of native plants. I can definitely share this plan with you. What's that?
The root length, that will make a difference.
Yeah, that's why we would go with perennials and native plants.
Turf grass, it doesn't infiltrate very well.
Right.
That's for my proposal is for green infrastructure. They work with the city and try and improve that. So we have come closer to meet the infiltration requirements.
Yeah, and we would love to expand these basins, but we're just controlled by that groundwater. There's areas we're not allowed to infiltrate.
And higher by Allen Boulevard, it's impossible to do any kind of infiltration or porous pavement up there because there's no water to capture or.
Right, yep. That's the upstream side of the site, so hard to make water go upstream.
Are you planning on a liner for the pervious pavement?
Previous pavement will not have a liner. Where we placed it, we have the required separation. The only place that we have a liner planned as the bioretention basin again, just because the groundwater is shallow in that location. We don't have the required separations for DNR.
So this is the bioretention basin and bays of pervious pavement. And if you can notice, they're relatively high. And the parking lot kind of dives down quickly, you know, to this lower tier of the site. And these roofs are draining back into the ponds. As he's shown it, the only thing that's draining towards Middleton Beach Road directly is just the face of the building to the east.
So we're looking for tonight then is some comment on the fees in lieu of and the overall design, or just fees in lieu of?
You can comment on the overall design. Yes, fees in lieu is, I think, what's needed.
Yeah, let's do it as two separate ones of,
And you could break the fees in lieu into components, you know, infiltration and peak discharge fee. in lieu. Or you want to accept either of them.
Okay.
These two ponds are gonna be adequate for the future apartment buildings?
Yeah, the
And
design
those
shows.
apartment buildings, do they go down into the ground? Do they have basements?
They're fully exposed on the east side because of how the site drops off, but they are buried on the Allen Boulevard frontage. And then just
Where's the parking going?
the parking is in that lowest level of those buildings.
So when you say,
Here are the two drives into the surface below building part. And for these two buildings that are proposed currently, these are the two entrances.
Oh, that's the parking entrance.
scrape
No,
getting
that's
in your
okay.
way.
I'm moving back to get out of graces.
so is there any estimate how much the sump pumps are?
We don't have a number on that. All those basements are above groundwater for the most part. When you get to the west, that groundwater kind of follows the grade, so we start punching into that groundwater. Townhouses are fully above. There wouldn't be any, I wouldn't imagine there wouldn't be any continuous groundwater pumping.
So is this gonna be better than the heritage site down the street?
I'm not familiar with that.
I have been told by the developer, they pump all the time.
Where's that one?
The heritage senior living.
It's
It's
On
just south
Well,
of,
that's across the street of Allen Boulevard.
not Mayflower.
Across
How about the one on Lake Street, the development
I
that's?
don't know. I just know
61?
that Jacob told me they pump water all the time.
I
It
mean,
seems to me that for sustainability, pumping water all the time is not a good thing for the city to approve.
Yeah.
Unless there's some way that we could run it off solar power.
well, while I agree with you, I think that is beyond our authority to do that. I mean, you know, I would love to see, if I had my druthers. You see my sticker, right? If I had my druthers, there'd be no gas to any new developments, you know, it would all be like Bell Farm, right? Air source heat pumps, geothermal, solar, no gas, nothing, a lot of buses. But that's not, if we can't impose requirements that don't exist
But we can make a recommendation
to,
to the developer.
oh, sure,
Sure.
then,
That would
and
be-
I can
that
tell you at the,
Appreciate more
yep, at the,
infrastructure, and we would, if you're gonna have some pumps
right,
to install solar power on your roofs to help generate the energy for that.
exactly, and that's what I tried to do on plan commission, is ask every developer, will your development help us or hinder us from meeting our 100% renewable energy goal?
I assume they would take that seriously if they wanted it approved, and not that it goes one way
We
or the other,
can't,
but.
if the state would allow us to require that, yes,
Yeah.
but that's not the case, so.
Does solar power on the roof affect a green roof?
No.
You wouldn't have a green roof anymore.
It would limit where we could put it. Yep.
Yeah.
Depends on
Well,
how the
that's-
configuration is, so I don't know.
you can plant underneath the solar panels.
Oh, sure, but
But-
it's
I'm not saying it's.
still the rain's gonna run off the solar panels and coagulate in just specific areas. You're not gonna take full advantage of the roof. So it's a conflict.
It depends on how much of the surface of the roof they use for green space, green infrastructure versus solar.
I think you were talking the entire roof structure.
No,
No, just.
5%, about 5% of the site is greener, 5% of the site is green,
Okay,
not 5% of the buildings, 5% of the entire property. It's green.
What percentage of the buildings?
14,000.
Yeah, I don't have that specific number. I know that on the larger buildings, we're proposing that 50% of the amenity space, that middle section is green. And I don't, we show it roughly on current plans of where those green roofs are planned.
Yeah.
In addition to the green roof, over 1% is porous pavement, 3% is grass pavers, 3% is bioretention. In addition to that, not kind of non-green, if you will, would be 3%, or sorry, 8% wet pond and 1% dry pond, I guess 20%, over 20% of the site. Stormwater management, well in excess, almost double of what you would typically see on a property of 10 to 12% committed to stormwater management.
I have another question. What are you going to do to keep any water from going into the wetlands on the other side?
That's not what the drainage pattern does. The drainage pattern overtops Mendota if in the extreme large events. As it does currently.
So that will be, that's
Or
fragile.
sorry, Nelson Beach Road, yes.
Yeah, the city hasn't, they've worked on restoring it. It needs a lot more work, but it's a very fragile, unique, perhaps a calcareous fin even, which is very rare. So we don't want to do anything that will damage that.
But there is no drainage to the north on this.
No, but I'm
Design.
talking sideways. Yeah, to the north. It's got, if it goes over the road, it will go into there.
No, well, I don't think so.
No, it goes east.
Across the road.
As it does.
Right now, I think, Susan, there's maybe 6 inches of difference between where you are over top Mendota Avenue versus where it first overtops Mendota Beach Road.
Okay, so. Huge flood could be a problem, but
Yeah,
2018.
perhaps.
It's a problem all over the place.
you know.
Right.
Well, I'd like to make a motion, like I said before, of not accepting fees in lieu of for infiltration. Have the developer work with the city to come closer to meeting our requirement by infrastructure and any other means. So that's a motion I'd like to make, and we can separate that one to the peak if you would like. Peak flows.
So you mean that then Eric will work with your record to come up with a approved solution, or that you want to come back?
Do you want
Let me
to
second
target
it
it?
first. So I'll second that motion. Now we
Thank you.
can discuss.
Thank you, sorry.
You want to set a target? Is that what you're asking?
Well, yeah, I mean, you understand this stuff much better than I do, and well, everybody around here does, think better than I, but I mean. I understand what you're trying to do, but I'm asking, do we need to come back and see it again, or if Eric feels that it's as good as it's gonna get, then he approves it and we move on.
I think we'd want to see it again if they couldn't meet the requirements, because the motion is to meet the requirement.
Is that your
No,
idea?
that was,
I think they should come back.
okay.
I want to,
Yeah.
what David said when I seconded, your motion is that they meet the number. Period. Is that correct?
Mhm.
That's not what I heard.
I want the
I-
words in your mouth.
That's
I know.
But
Okay,
no, that's how I heard it. And so I would make a substitute motion to defer action on the fees in lieu request until staff can work with
Well,
the
I'm
developer.
assuming the last umpteen months, these guys have been working together to do whatever they can to come as close as they can to the ordinance. They've already had, I don't know how many meetings, more than you want to count, and more than Eric wants to talk about either, right? They've been doing this now for.
We have met both before anything was put on paper and after.
I know how this
Yeah,
works.
With Elliot over at the county.
And DNR staff.
So, you know. I'm still seconding Warren's motion that we meet the infiltration requirement. And I think the only way to do that is to reduce the footprints of some of the impervious areas. Now, that's not gonna sit well, I understand that, but that's how they feel.
But didn't
Much
Eric-
more green infrastructure could do it.
I don't see it. I believe what I see, they've thrown everything they could at this site, as it's been designed, as it's been laid out for the imperviousness. You know, can't. I don't know what else you could do, right? But
Right. But groundwater really limits us for.
groundwater is there, it's gonna be there after you're done building. Will be pumping, we all know that. There will be overflow, we all know that, I know that. I know that. So, again, I'm just seconding Warren's motion, I'm trying to clarify the motion, to make sure we're all on the same understanding.
Well, I'm trying to understand it because I thought Eric was showing us in the ordinance that this is a case where fees in lieu would be allowed under our ordinance.
Again, I don't know how to say it differently. They've done all they can to the maximum extent practicable for this layout of this design.
So
A
in
diff-
other words,
Different layout, single family home on
rejecting-
that lot, they wouldn't have to worry about anything, they will meet everything. Now, I'm being a little facetious here by saying, you know, single family home on a 7 acre lot. But my point is, a different layout, a different amount of parking or roof or size of building. May allow them to meet the numbers. And they're going as far as they can with this layout. Does that make sense?
it does, but I guess what I'm asking is if since you already believe that they have done everything they can, you're basically saying if you can't get to the infiltration requirement, you can't build this.
If I had to make the vote, that would be my vote.
But then why do we have an ordinance that allows fee in lieu of?
Right.
And
They could alter the design.
I wanna know if they can they do without three parking stalls? Can they do without one less unit of a housing unit? 2 less housing units, that kind of stuff.
I just have I have a hard time denying development in an area where there's already, I mean, it's almost like we're saying everyone else who got here first can have as much, there's no requirement for native landscaping along the lakefront. There's a road, there's no sidewalk, but a lot of, with the video we saw, the water's rushing towards the lake over paved surface that is private, a private yard. And
Some period of time, though, you're gonna have to make a change in how we do things.
Yeah.
And maybe this is the time. I mean, we didn't have volume control before either. I think volume control is important. So
Right.
I think there is.
But I
a
also-
time, and we've always kind of accepted fees in lieu that the developer's doing all we can, but I don't think that necessarily the public feels that way. That maybe there's some other increment they can
that's
do.
something else that we need. I mean, that's a different discussion. How to-
So making the motion is, I'm hoping that there is something that they could come up with to meet their ordinance.
Well, I would just say that I've previously been on this commission and we've granted fees in lieu for developments on farmland that are upstream that contribute as much to the pollution and the water and the salts getting into Lake Mendota as this site will. And there's never been such consternation over, Red Tail Ridge, Bell Farm, the Ziegler property, which we'll be talking about soon. We can either build up or we can build out. And at some point we have to change, right? And that's what's happening now. We're recognizing we can't continue to build out because we're using up all the farmland and we're taking over all our growth area. So someday we're going to be like Monona, completely landlocked. This is one of those changes, having to.
And that is close to Lake Mendota, which other ones aren't.
Yeah.
And part of our recharge requirement is for replenishing the groundwater aquifer. In this case, there is no groundwater aquifer, right? We're at lake level, so there is a difference.
So the water from Red Tail Ridge doesn't make its way into Lake Mendota
It does through the groundwater system.
and
That probably goes into the
doesn't bring.
conservancy. And this one here is into the glacial system. Aquifer, the water table, but it's right at the lake level, so essentially the one and the same.
And I understand, Lisa, what you're saying, you know, when those houses were built on Mendoza Beach Road. They were on wetlands, they were on salt soils and
And there were no.
not a great
requirements
area, and I wasn't around, we weren't around to say yay or nay or what to do. I'm just getting a little tired of knowing that I'm gonna be causing a problem here. Like with just allowing this to go in the way it is. If I had my way, the rezoning never would have gone through a year ago. And I know that's not very popular either, but I would have left it as zoned as open space. It's just not a good spot to put a building, in my opinion. So that happened and I can't take that back. So. That's
Don't we have some obligation to protect what's on Middleton Beach Road since it's already there, even though it went in?
Well, that's what our staff has said. That was his intention. Staff's primary concern is to ensure that during large storm events, the development will not lead to increases in flood elevations downstream and thereby increase flood risks to public infrastructure and private properties lying between the development and Lake Mendota. And I trust our staff to do that.
That's requiring 100% or more infiltration, and it can't be done on this.
I don't think it's related to infiltration, what my
Or
concern
containment.
is. It's just a peak rate comparison. If this site was, if Middleton Beach Road did not lay between this site and the lake, you know, DNR code would allow it to be exempt from peak discharge.
Yeah,
if there were no downstream infrastructure.
Yeah, so there's no,
right.
the groundwater we're infiltrating. It's my best guess that it ends up in Lake Mendota shortly thereafter. Slowing it down is not necessarily a benefit to flood elevations in Lake Mendota.
It depends on how long Lake Mendota stays at high levels and what the travel time is through the groundwater system.
Right.
This is clay soil, so I think we're talking probably inches or feet per day versus direct runoff. So without doing a groundwater model,
Right.
we'd have to estimate whether it was a
You're
week
not-
or 2 weeks or whatever.
You're still only talking about infiltrating, you know, very best case, you're infiltrating a couple of inches in a single storm.
Right.
So most of it is running across the surface regardless.
Yeah. Well, we have a motion and a second, so we call a motion.
Can you restate it?
What'd you write down? No pressure.
No, Warren moved to not accept fees, but to work with the developer to meet the infiltration requirement.
Yes.
That,
Right.
I still have the question, what happens if they can't meet that requirement? They come back and say, we worked and worked and worked, we can't do.
That's right. It doesn't kill the project, it means they have to come back and talk about it again.
Help. Yes, right.
Well, I think it kills the project as it now stands with the footprint that it has. I mean, that's what you were saying.
That, I don't know how they can do it without changing something. Can they make it narrow or dry? Less roof, less building, something.
Does the removal,
Number one, this is a recommendation to the city council, right? That's
Council can
all we
ignore
do
it.
is make a
Council can ignore
recommendation.
this, right?
We're recommending not to accept fees on the law.
And you're not saying a reduced amount or a slightly better performance? You know, if I'm gonna be the one who's working with Drew to try to lay this out, what's my target? What percent?
I think it's pretty clear in Warren's, he's saying meet the ordinance, meet the
Yeah.
infiltration.
90% is the target. Okay,
We're not going to that 100% like Red Tail, right? We're not doing that. The ordinance.
Okay, all in favor?
I'll do a roll call on it.
Yeah, can we do a roll call for me?
Okay, all in favor? Nate,
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay,
Nay,
Hey,
get a motion fails.
It does.
Now you wanna know about peak flow, or is that really necessary to get a motion on? You need something on that?
Well, we need a motion to either
Nick,
approve it or revise the motion. We could revise it to work as best they
Oh,
can to meet it.
Okay.
so we just voted no to Warren's motion, but that doesn't mean that we just approved.
right.
Correct.
fees in lieu.
That's fine.
Okay,
We've approved
just
anyway.
making sure we're
Okay.
all
Okay.
talking on the
I
same
hear you.
page.
I see.
Okay.
I would make a motion. I guess I'll move that we defer decision on fees in lieu tonight and ask the developer to work with staff to achieve greater than what they currently have in time for our December meeting.
I'll say.
So I want to ask now, it's on the table, I'll ask the question, is that really? Have a chance of making any difference in what you've already got put together, because again, I'll say it again, they're doing this. You guys have been going back and forth, and now, I know Eric's been trying his best to keep the,
Yeah, I understand. You make a good point. At the same time, I think if we tell engineering that they need
one more
to,
chance.
they need to push a little bit harder and work with the developer and see what they can do, then maybe we won't get to 90%, but I think we could still nibble away some more. And I mean, this is classic rock and a hard place. I mean,
Yeah.
and we a great area geographically in terms of center of the city area to have more development. Crappy area geographically in terms of the site and where it is to the lake and site conditions. And so I'd like to see something happen. I don't want to cut them off the knees. But I also want to protect the homeowners along the lake. And I mean, it's already crappy. We saw that in the pictures. But we don't want to make it any worse, like you said. So yes, I'd like them to.
I have no problem voting in favor of that, if there's some chance that something might be accomplished.
Yeah.
I'm looking for, putting you guys on the spot saying, yeah, let's talk some more.
Well,
I
I
doubt
mean,
if
maybe
he's-
it'll come back with 3 fewer parking spaces, or maybe there's some way. I know it's the site specifically that we need to be looking at, but maybe there's a way to use the movement of that sidewalk into the public right of way. And get rid of all the perpendicular parking that's now turned into parallel parking. You know, maybe there's a way to reduce things further.
On the sidewalks, you've mentioned it a couple of times, the main reason we're not moving into the right of way is because there's a number of mature trees that all have to come down or put the sidewalk in the right of way.
I know.
Trying to avoid this.
Sure, no, and I appreciate that. I wonder if there, if I remember the comment, I assume it was Sean's comment that moving it to the outside of that curve would make it clear that that is for public use and not just for I mean, he wanted it to be available for public use. So I don't know if there's a way to meander it through these lovely mature trees or not, but that, yeah.
Mature trees are pretty much taking up the
The
entire,
entire,
the base of the tree is taking up the entire gap between.
okay, yeah, we wouldn't want to see trees taken down
I think,
unless they're, assuming they're healthy.
I think Sean has a layout in mind. that
He does,
might
okay.
work.
And that's, yeah, that's why my motion was to have you guys work on it.
I think either way, it's gonna affect property. It's the same impervious surface.
It's my, over the years, fees in lieu of. And I expressed this to Eric, is I always thought fees in lieu of is kind of an easy out for a developer. That they could get around to get it approved by just paying fees without taking the next hard step. And now in your case, you kind of assured me it's not, but I think that's my perception over all these years and seeing many fees in lieu of requests. That we said yes with tongue in cheek.
And I would respond to that by asking you to tell me what percentage of the site, those sites were committing to stormwater. I bet you it's much less than 10% when they're asking for the fee.
That's just my perception of.
I agree. No, I agree.
And I think maybe some developer did that as an easy out. Last one, we approved that apartment building in Greenway. He filled the whole footprint up with his apartment building, so he couldn't meet infiltration. Well, he could have made a smaller apartment building and met infiltration. But by the time we got it, it was too late.
I think that site was constrained with groundwater as well, where most of that site was not allowed to infiltrate. Per unit standard.
So we have a motion and a second.
Did you second that, David?
All in favor?
I,
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion's carried then.
Yes. I got 6-1.
oh,
Do we need a separate one on what was the name?
Susan,
Or is there a fees in lieu of request for peak control too?
Yes.
And this is only because of the, is it 1 year?
1 year.
It's a 1-year storm as presented. I made a comment to Drew a few days ago, didn't make it into the packet. He has said if he, complies with my comment, that'll make it for the 2-year storm also. It's a curve number comment, Jim.
So we don't have a dollar figure on the fees in lieu of. No.
Yeah, I can give you that.
Ballpark it.
In the presented plan, it was 22,000 with the 2-year added to it, it'd double it to 44,000 for peak flow.
I'm sorry, I'm struggling with this. What are the actual numbers here, Eric? Is it under the depression peak or is it under the overall?
Overall peak.
Overall table,
No,
which is,
probably the first table, I believe.
yeah, so the 1 year is point, right now it's a quarter CFS, it's under post development, it'd be 0.48 CFS, right?
And that 2-year would be 0.6 in pre-development and 0.68 in post-development. 0.63 of that just being portion along Middleton Beach.
We think we know we can measure these things like this.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And if we were to use the C or D soil comparison, we wouldn't even have this problem. We'd be meeting those peak flow limits.
I know, but numbers are numbers. Those two numbers, as far as impacts go, don't bother me at all, and if it's a fee in lieu, that'll get around that. Or you're asking Eric that there would be some changes in the curve numbers and recalculate this table?
Yeah.
And then those new numbers,
He'd
But
be
he can
missing
match.
the 2-year storm also.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
just say that.
See that 0.08, yep, 0.08 increase. The 1 year doesn't change very significantly.
I always think a quarter CFS is a 4-inch drain tile. That's about the flow out of
Okay,
just to help visualize.
Yeah.
Our final control practice is a 2-inch orifice. That still doesn't allow us to meet those 1 and 2 year pre-development flow rates.
And I don't like a 2-inch
you don't want to go
orifice.
smaller, yeah, when it's small anyway, because it just gets.
So that's another issue. I don't want to have a maintenance problem that then has the pond full when the storm hits.
Understand.
So there's
I don't even know why we have a 1 year frequency.
DNR, isn't it?
I think when NPDES phase 2 came out, that was the 1 year
Supposedly a channel,
and nothing more. And then they added the 2.
it's supposed to be a channel forming flow rates. It's.
Yeah, I think it's, but you don't cheat the system and just dump all the water out in small events. Allow you to meet the bigger ones.
Can I ask maybe a stupid question, but how is redevelopment defined? So why isn't this site, since it has fill? You know, it's not pristine, it's not
It's based on impervious area.
impervious, okay. That answers my question.
And you can end up with a, prorated mishmash
Mhm.
of either, both.
I mean, what do you mean? Only matter, what do you mean? Redevelopment numbers for infiltration, I'm not sure about recharge.
If in fact you do squeeze out a little more volume for the infiltration motion that we just got done passing, you probably take care of this also maybe. No? Because of the,
Because of that little area that we just can't get.
oh, that, he said that.
But sidewalk changes, perhaps we, wrangle something to use some of the right of way as more formal depression, and maybe that goes away.
Yeah, we're also preserving some trees by an existing depression, which is why we can't expand it. There's, I know, one massive swamp oak over there, and a number of red pines that we're trying to maintain.
So we need a motion to either approve fees in lieu for
Got a
1 year
motion.
peak or
I think there's a motion on the table.
I don't think there was.
or-
Yes, we need a motion.
I guess I will move to approve the fees in lieu request for recharge with final amount to be determined by staff.
I think we
No.
were lumping the recharge in with the infiltration when we were talking about peak
Peak rate.
discharge.
Discharge.
Okay,
Discharge.
discharge.
Peak discharge.
Right.
Do you have a motion for us? You didn't have a staff memo, you did,
I did not give you.
okay. Well, I'm just looking at where you said staff recommends approval of the fees in lieu request. With the final amount to be determined by staff after further review and anticipated minor adjustments to the stormwater management plan. I want to capture all that good stuff. I just need the first part.
Well, I think we're not talking about minor adjustments anymore.
Any anticipated adjustments.
Is there a second?
Well, okay.
Yeah,
Well, I want to make sure that it's the right fees in lieu request. This is the discharge.
This is the peak flow discharge.
Okay, so I move accepting the staff's recommendation to approve the peak flow discharge fees in lieu request for the final amount to be determined by staff after further review and anticipated adjustments to the stormwater management plan.
Second.
You got it, Richard?
Yep.
I did send it.
He read it off. He read it off the memo. I could pull that there.
Glad it wasn't recommended.
At that point, it's just on eye roll. Is all that really matters. The rest is
I'll second that.
in there.
That's right, it's seconds.
Man.
Ooh,
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
Grace did. I'm sorry. I did not hear that either.
Sorry.
Got it.
She's
You guys
got
are
to
making fun of me.
speak louder.
All in favor?
You don't want me to speak
Aye.
louder.
Aye. Opposed?
I
6-1 again.
Motion is approved. We need anything else on this Allen Boulevard site?
I just had a question for Eric about, so Chuck Non's comments. Are you similar? I know they're similar in detail.
Right, yeah, some of Chuck's were the same as mine,
Okay,
some were.
I just want to make sure that when you two are working
some I
together, that
disagree
you're
with, they're very
addressing the
detailed.
Yeah,
comments
we've
that
gone
you
through
have.
all of those. And
Okay.
did according. That makes sense.
Okay, then we're done with this one.
You say we are.
Yep.
For now.
May we
We
take,
kept it on 20 minutes. Like an hour.
Yes, yeah, I think we should take a.
maybe take a,
Recess?
yeah, short one? About 10 minutes?
Thank
5?
you, Lisa.
5 minutes.
Bringing that up. I'll second.
Thanks, Chuck. No, it was not.
So.
Thank you.
Somebody, there's still people in there. Don't we have another? Getting a little warm in here.
It's small. It was warm when we got in here.
Yeah. Somewhere to cover all. Secure your room.
Well, that's perfect.
Maybe they're trying to run. Easier.
I wasn't expecting that much. I was.
Just get rid of this.
All right.
So we're gonna get a lot of.
Yeah.
Why don't you come up to the table?
I wasn't with you weren't there.
Got to be a more comfortable chair.
I was taking care of the little one that day.
Alright, it's nice.
$2,000-3,000 here and there.
Yeah.
No, I asked for the Greenway Center.
Hey, that's Ziegler's.
It's $4,000.
Yeah.
Everybody's back.
I was heading north on.
Lisa, I don't think I've accepted fees in lieu for Creek Field.
Boom.
You were heading south then.
South, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, south. Yeah, and I,
Got some.
anyway,
Yeah.
the real problem is trying to do everything online.
Everybody's getting comfortable.
Yeah,
Happened to the deer.
I gotta talk to somebody about the heat.
I wasn't there the next morning, so I just kept going.
They turned it down.
It's not muted anymore.
The car is not fine, it's $4,000 worth of damage, but it's still totally.
I had one run into me at the intersection of Allen and University.
Oh, there you go.
What is the side of the car?
Yeah.
They're done. There's something wrong with this room if you close the doors.
Oh, yeah,
It heats up.
the HVAC is not good.
It's the interview.
Is-
We like to put everybody in
Yeah.
and then when they, yeah,
Cook up for a while.
yeah.
Remind me, never to interview.
Yeah.
I know, it gets warm in here, both doors are. I don't know.
Let's go.
You ready to reconvene, Warren?
Yep. I started, next item of business is Sigler property.
Yeah, and we have two people here from Wiser Engineering. Kate Maher and Wade Wise. Well, maybe Wade, no, there he is.
When was it?
Hi.
Hello. You guys can screen share, or I could pull up the PowerPoint.
I will
share
my screen. Oh, it says you cannot share while someone else is sharing. So if you stop sharing, I can share. Mr. Chair, are we going to see if anyone in the public has a comment?
Click out of there and then that red button at the top bar where you.
You gotta get out of that. There. Hey.
All right. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
All
Hey,
right.
hey, hold on for a minute. Warren,
Yep.
you want to see if anybody wants to comment who's remotely listening?
Listening to them.
We did it already to start with. We have to do it for each item.
You don't
You
have,
don't
to,
have to accept comment at all.
but you did.
If someone else wants to make some comments from remotely, that's fine. I see Herb's there, so maybe he does. But anybody like to make comments on this item?
This is Herb. I just had to unmute here. I sent in the email comments, so I don't know, prior to your presentation, the only reservation I had was about the infiltration rates, that looking at the soils analyses, several of the pits close to where the southeast stormwater facilities are had fairly shallow groundwater levels there, around 6 to 6.5 feet. Plus, they also mentioned, interbedding of other finer materials in some of the pits that involved the infiltration facilities. So I had some reservations about whether the selected infiltration rates could actually be met, and whether you've addressed those adequately. And then, I had the general comments in my email that I'll just, I won't mention those again.
Okay, thanks, Herb. Anybody else?
Sure, I can go next. My name is Rick Atherson. I serve on the board of directors for the Friends of Pheasant Branch Conservancy, and also serve on the watershed committee along with Herb and Hans. We're, obviously the Friends has been very interested in this property for quite a long time. We've had several meetings with the members of the Ziegler family, including site walkthroughs, and have provided I think Wade, you've gotten copies of the reports that we've put together and suggestions that we've included. I know that Eric has copies of that as well, and maybe has passed that along to members of the commission. But we're obviously very interested in the property and would like to be as helpful as we can as the property develops, with the understanding that we want to try to work to preserve the downstream Pheasant Branch corridor and potentially make enhancements that both wildlife and humans can coexist through this environmental corridor. So I think without being able to see the stormwater management plan prior to commenting, it's a little bit hard to comment on specifics now, but certainly we'd be interested in helping out through the process as we're allowed to.
Thank you, Rick. Anybody else? Not? Can I start the presentation then?
Well, thank you, everyone. I'll lead off and then I'll turn it over to Kate, who will give you more a technical background. But this project for us, Ziegler Farm Development, this is something that started for us back in June. So even before that, we had the privilege to work on Red Tail Ridge. So we've been a part of this neighborhood and the design of this neighborhood for quite some time. I think that's important for a couple of reasons. When this first came to us with the planning concept, obviously we understood that water resources and stormwater management would be a sensitive topic. So from about June through August, we went back and forth. We did obviously do the test pits and the site due diligence that we needed to identify soils on the site. And we had that information along with the wetland delineation to really inform the developer about the developable acreage and where stormwater infiltration makes sense and where it doesn't. And you'll see in our plan tonight that we have generally infiltrating facilities throughout, with a couple of wet basins to meet the ordinance and the 100% stay on goal. The other thing that I bring to the meeting tonight is just have been a part of this project through the commission and through the meetings that we've been presenting to: Conservancy, Sustainability, Parks and Recreation, the neighborhood plan meetings, all those kind of things. So we've been trying to bring changes to the plat, and we think we've listened to most of the feedback, and we welcome your feedback as well as we fine tune this preliminary plat and bring a final stormwater management to your attention. So a conversation tonight, and with that, I'll turn it over to Kate to go into more technical details.
Yep, so here's some more, where the project is located. It's a residential single-family home subdivision for Middleton. And it's located between Graber Pond and that Pheasant Branch Road. So this is more of a layout. It's medium to high density single-family development. And the impervious areas are all based on the assumptions based on the zoning code for medium and high density. The stormwater management plan includes the development of those single-family homes, as well as the right-of-ways and the walking paths that are shown. What it doesn't include is the walking path across the wetland, which is assumed to be kind of a boardwalk, elevated boardwalk that's going to have pervious areas below. And also doesn't include, future improvements to High Road or any improvements within the parks or conservancy areas. So this is kind of an overview of the existing site. The existing site is mainly agricultural row crop production, and there are two major watersheds. There's west to Graber Pond and east to the drainage way existing through the wetland. And so the development is located southwest of the site is the Spring Hill Estates plat. The Spring Hill Estates plat includes a stormwater management basin that's located in the northwest corner of the plat. If you can see my mouse, that's here, which discharges onto our site. And then there's also storm sewer for most of the Spring Hill Estates, which is this plat to the south that conveys all this water to this basin. And then there's also the Graber Pond, which is here. So this portion of the site, the west portion, will flow into Graber Pond, and Graber Pond will have an emergency overflow up through this northern plat development, which is the Misty Valley development, which then crosses over High Road and goes through the eastern drainage way. So ultimately, the overflow for everywhere is east this drainage way, which goes towards Pheasant Branch Road and the Conservancy. There are also multiple, crossings under High Road that convey this site, the runoff, and High Road, and the area to the north to this eastern drainage way. So these are the main 3 requirements that we were working on. These are based on city, county, DNR standards, as well as matching other requirements of similar developments in the area. So as we said, we worked on Red Tail Ridge, which requires 100% of pre-development infiltration volume being stayed on for the site. And so to meet this goal, we're requesting credit for the infiltration of offsite runoff being provided on the site. So first, I want to talk about that we did a preliminary investigation of 26 test pits to kind of guide how the site was going to lay out. So this is the existing site with a previous layout, which shows where previous development was going to be laid out. And with these test pits, we found, high groundwater and redox in some areas. And this really impacted how we decided how to change the site and make it lay out so that we could actually have areas with better infiltration rates. So you can see these test pit 25, 24, and 13 are in this corner. And in this corner, there was previously development shown, but the infiltration rates here were low, and there was a high elevation of seasonal groundwater. And so we looked at multiple layouts, but ultimately development of this area was removed due to the restrictions of the infiltration. So this is kind of just an example of here's the current layout with the same test pits, and now there's no development there, and how the information of the soils has really guided the development of this plat. So this is our proposed watersheds. So again, there's the 2 major watersheds. There's the Graber Pond to the west and High Road and East Range Way to the east. These 2 have been separated for the eastern ones of High Road and the eastern drainage way were separated for the peak rate, just to maintain that the High Road peak rates were not going to overtop High Road. So for the western watershed, there's a wet pond and infiltration basin. Along High Road, there are 3 bioretention basins, and they capture runoff from this area as well as the discharge from this existing pond in the Spring Hill Estates. And on the east side, there's 2 bioretention basins, a wet pond, and an infiltration basin. And the storm sewer from Red Tail Ridge, which discharges in this northwest corner up here, as well as discharge from the overflow of Graber Pond and Misty Valley, are all going to be passed through the site, but not passed through safely through the site, but not captured by any stormwater management. So the first requirement was peak runoff rate. And so the peak runoff rate modeling, again, was split up to analyze pre and post for the Graber Pond watershed, the High Road, and the east of High Road, that drainage way area. There was a small increase to the eastern drainage way, but that's just due to the areas that cannot be captured by any stormwater management facility due to the grading of raising the basins high enough so that they have separation distance from the groundwater levels. And when combined with the High Road and the overall total site, which is where everything eventually drains eastward anyways, there's no increases to the overall site. The next thing we looked at was TSS. Again, we split the sites for the Graber Pond watershed, as well as this eastern one, to make sure that we were meeting the 80% TSS reduction for both areas. And both areas are over that 80%. As well as providing pre-treatment for the infiltration basins within bioretention basins and wet ponds. And the last part is stay on. And so to get to stay on for 100%, we are assuming that based on previous developments in this area, that 100% pre-development stay on is going to be required for this site. And to reach that, we are requesting the credit of the infiltration of offsite runoff to meet that 100% goal. And in doing so, we've talked with the city about how much credit we can take for the offsite runoff. And the credit that we've been talked about is that we can only take credit for 100% or runoff volume over the 100% pre-development stay-on volume. So the offsite runoff has been restricted to assume that the offsite areas are meeting the stay-on assumptions listed. Using these assumptions reduces the amount of runoff draining to the sites. So this reduces the amount of runoff provided on site to those offsite areas. And this provides a more conservative estimation of the amount of infiltration provided to the offsite areas. And so while the offsite areas are completely developed and currently have no specific infiltration features, I think later on you're discussing potential improvements to the Spring Hill Estates Pond to maybe help provide infiltration. But given that there's no current infiltration, it's going to be hard to reach that 90% goal. But we're assuming that it is reaching that 90% stay-on goal. And so only the runoff volume beyond that is being calculated in running off onto our site to take credit for that infiltration. Yep.
So I'm gonna clarify Spring Hill
Yeah.
rehab I'm talking about. The assumption was that when that rehab is done, it will achieve 90% infiltration up from the watershed. Is that what I heard?
That's not exactly the assumption. It's what I told her to limit her credit to. So she's got a kind of a tiny sliver that's not draining through Spring Hill Pond that's headed towards Graber. I said she could take credit for the incremental runoff above 100% infiltration.
Okay.
And then for the part that's draining through the pond, I said you could take credit for the increment above 90%. What I've got designed for the Spring Hill Pond improvement, I think, is maxing out about 85% infiltration. And I didn't want to lose the capability to capture that myself. We may need it for High Road, frankly.
Yeah.
That's what we did with Red Tail when we gave them a little bit of credit for the incremental runoff over 100% from lands that were site upstream in Springfield.
Thank you.
Yep. And then there's also that little section, there's a small section of High Road that's adjacent to the site that is currently going to be captured by Byron-Tinton Basin, but we're not taking any credit for that, given the fact that High Road is going to be redeveloped in the future and the watersheds may change. So no credit for that portion of infiltration was counted. Okay, so then the outcome of that is that the western Graber Pond watershed and the eastern one were again analyzed separately to try to match 100% of the pre-development stay-on. And so the western watershed provides more than 100% stay-on without including any infiltration provided to those offsite areas. And then with that, offsite area provides extra. So this top one over here is the west watershed. And it shows that the stay-on without including any infiltration offset areas is already at 103% of the pre-development stay-on volume. And the eastern watershed provides more than the typical 90% stay-on requirement for the infiltration of offset areas with just the on-site runoff volumes. And with the credit to the off-site runoff volume, with that infiltration, then they're meeting the 100% stay-on. And then this graphic just shows the percentage of stay-ons within each watershed and infiltration facility spread out across the entire site. And that includes the passive stay-on in the grass areas. And as the graphic shows, the infiltration is trying to be spread out across the site. It is trying to be not heavily concentrated in regional infiltration facilities, such that these two infiltration facilities downstream of wet ponds are only providing 14.5% of the overall stay-on. So that's kind of the end of the review of the main three stormwater requirements. And if we have more questions, we can go back and review those.
Just to clarify, the surface watershed divide between Graber Pond and the rest of the site, is that pretty much following what the current topography shows?
Yep, it's fairly
Pretty
consistent.
much.
Yeah, I'm trying to go back a couple slides. So this is the existing Graber Pond watershed,
Gotcha.
and this is the proposed. You can kind of see in this graphic the pre versus post. The pre-development one has 8.9 acres. The post-development one has 9.4 acres. So there's a slight increase to the watershed.
Kate, I have a question. There's no additional water going into Graber's Pond then from this development?
That watershed just got bigger by half an acre.
Yep.
That's what I thought he said.
Yeah, okay, you're right, you're right.
So you look at impact on Graber's Pond, then it would be nil as far as this development's concerned.
Well, it would be nil for the infiltration level events. But in a 100-year storm, you'd have a half acres more of volume, plus all the additional volume from the impervious area of the development.
Yeah. So over the course of the year, we will see more water going into Graber's Pond. Water levels going
Not over the course of an average annual year.
on the 1 year frequency.
But yeah, if you get a big, same problem as we've had with anything else, any storm that's roughly above a 2 year, there's more volume over the surface and into Graber.
I assume in a minute or two, and talk about MSA's amendment. They got all this information, they'll have to incorporate it into their work that they do for the Graber Pond.
Right.
So the infiltrated water going in the groundwater system is like Bell Farm, it moves towards a conservancy, not towards Graber Pond.
I think that's the conclusion of an older USGS report.
That this development is down, the groundwater is
The
down.
Graber is perched and,
This is down, groundwater wise, it's downstream of Graber Pond.
yeah. Yeah. And it may even feed Frederick Springs, maybe too far southeast by this point.
Is there going to be an impact on that conservancy land with the discharge from this development? Are we going to get more flows down through that, down towards Pheasant Branch Road?
You shouldn't have higher peaks, but you would have more drawn out peaks. So I think that's one of the concerns Herb Garn has brought up. So are we, causing erosive flows within what they call the western trip?
Is there a defined channel going through that conservancy now?
There is for part of it.
Part of it,
Yeah.
it'll probably be enhanced with more flows going through.
It's an issue. Friends have talked about reconnecting the floodplain, which would basically mean filling a chunk of that ditch.
That would be on, is that gonna become city property?
That's
This
the
is-
current intent.
Well,
Kylie?
That's the request, but I still think that there's conversations with the developer and how that land can be dedicated. So not yet, but the request from Conservancy.
Okay. But as of today, I can't read, there's a triangle, east of High Road, south of the development, proposed development, that's white. It is still, that's part of the property that the developer owns, right? Right now? that
Right.
part.
Hey, can you go back to maybe like your second or third slide?
Yes.
it's all, all the former Ziegler
Yeah.
property is now.
Conservancy
All
lands.
the way over to Branch or.
Yeah, there's one sliver that belongs to the city. which I think we'll see, and then there's another larger parcel
Yeah, that one.
that that nobody really. It's owned, but it's owned by a defunct development company. And it'd be great if the city could acquire that.
Yes. So the right-hand border of that green rectangle, is that basically Pheasant Branch Road?
I think it might be cut off.
It is a little cut
But it
off,
goes,
yeah.
okay.
It goes-
Yeah, it's slightly cut off, but
Eric, if you let me share, I can show a graphic that I think describes what you're looking at.
Can share.
you can share.
Okay. This is kind of the concept plan that's been routed around and discussed at all the other committees. So you can see, yes, the Ziegler property extends over to Pheasant Branch Road in this location. The area or the tract of land that's potentially being pursued off-site and not part of the Ziegler land is this area down here.
It's being pursued by
Well,
Just
it's,
discussions with the city.
yeah, it's an outlot for the Pheasant Branch Ridge subdivision, but the owner is not, yeah. It's the former development company, but it's not in business anymore, so.
is the land developable. It's all
We
wetland.
zoned it as
Well-
conservancy.
Oh.
Is it as well?
So that's the area that water flows through. There's no channel now, but we're probably.
No, the channel is located on the Ziegler property, and then there's a couple of kind of side draws that bring it to the north from Pheasant Branch Ridge.
It doesn't flow through the middle of this area here.
No, it flew, yeah, right where it wades,
Mhm.
showing
That
its
culvert then is here.
Yep.
Is that culvert gonna be big enough?
Well, peaks should not increase.
Should
Of
Not,
course it's gonna be big. Well, it's not big. Herb, is that over top? I don't, he's, that's one of his monitoring sites right there. I don't think it's ever over top that we've seen. Herb, are you there?
He's muted yet.
He's muted. Well, what about the friend's suggestion of having the adjacent wetlands be restored by filling in the Ziegler ditching and reconnecting it and allowing it to meander through the wetlands?
That's what we were just talking about. You know, and that'll come up during MSA's
Okay,
next agenda item
Okay.
too. The concern is that the ditch is very steep. It was dug or ditched agriculturally way back when. And that's not for the entire length, but it's for the eastern.
Yeah.
length. So what the Friends are concerned about is trying to make that a more natural stream, more resilient, giving it a connection to the floodplain. Things like that, conservancy style, I'll call it.
Right now, all we're trying to need to decide upon is the highlighted areas, developed areas, and that the stormwater management proposals for those areas are, what's the wording you got? Acceptable or whatever you say.
staff recommends approval of the preliminary.
Preliminary, yeah, okay.
our ordinance does say that any development has some responsibility for impacts downstream. But we're saying there should be no impacts downstream. But there'll be more frequent water flowing downstream, so there probably will be.
To say no impact is that, no development has no impact.
I think the main impacts are associated with drawing out the peaks.
Yeah.
So they're not releasing it any faster, but they're releasing it over a longer period of time, and that causes problems with the stream channels from, you know, eroding the banks and things like that.
A stream channel will be formed.
There's one there.
It will be reformed a little bit then.
But so part of what we're asking MSA to do in the next agenda item is to study this whole system.
Okay, what are we looking for tonight?
A motion that you're concurring with this preliminary plan, which they're over and above infiltration rates in both watersheds. I don't have a problem with that. I suppose location of ponds, if you think something should be more distributed or located farther upstream, you know, I think they've done a good job with where they've located this stuff. And then I would like your blessing on whether or not you're okay with these tiny amounts of offsite water, it turns out, right? Kate, it looks like you don't even need that anymore with your revisions.
It's needed for the eastern watershed, but not for the western watershed.
Okay.
Just to clarify, so all we're saying is you're taking credit because you're capturing water from offsite and infiltrating some of that or treating.
Exactly. There's certain areas that just can't be treated due to, you know, elevations that they're lower than the infiltration features. And so to, offset that, we're infiltrating some of the offsite areas.
Spring Hill, I get it, okay. I'll move approval of the preliminary, I just had it right here. Approval of the preliminary stormwater management plan for Ziegler Farm subdivision, PC 2674.
You're right.
I'll second.
Don?
Yep.
Any further discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
7-0. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wade. Okay.
Next item.
Next item then is,
I'm at 10.
It's a presentation from MSA on a contract amendment to do a lot of work for what I'm calling the Graber Greenway. Jeff Felland is here. And I guess, Jeff, why don't you make a presentation? And then I'll have a couple things to add, maybe.
Okay.
Or I might jump in.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all. So at Eric's request, request, MSA has put together a proposed amendment to an existing contract that covered Graber and Tiedemann Pond outlet studies or flood elevation studies. So as he mentioned, this is a kind of a more of a watershed level of projects comprised of a number of different stormwater management and habitat enhancement features. The figure Eric has up there now is the current Graber and portions of the Pheasant Branch watershed that really encompasses this idea as we're going to define it today. But before we get into the details of the components of this amendment, excuse me, I want to go back a little bit and revisit the kind of the MSA's partnership in this region of the city with the city. Our first efforts in this area were back in 2016 when we looked at a few stormwater management ponds kind of at the south end of this figure. They were talking about that just in the previous one, Spring Hill Drive, Pheasant Branch Ridge, Spring Hill Road. There's some existing ponds. Those are the two Pheasant Branch Ridge ponds. And then further west that the previous presenter was discussing. We did some evaluations of those ponds for retrofitting to get improved stormwater management. Our work specific to Graber Pond in the Graber Pond watershed started in 2019, where we had a contract looking at establishing and evaluating flood elevations in both Tiedemann Pond and Graber Pond. That due to the flooding that was being experienced at National Electrostatics, the southwest corner of Graber, and then also some residential homes along the overflow path between the pond outlet and Misty Valley Road. The city was looking at studying a way to design and implement an outlet structure for Graber Pond to try to reduce that flood risk for those properties. That started in 2019, or mid 2019. Later in the year, we were evaluating or asked to evaluate the sediment and phosphorus loads that might be expected to be carried with the Graber outlet, carried with flows outletted from Graber Pond. There was some opposition to the outlets from the public of Graber Pond outletting that presented some challenges to the design. It had gotten to pretty close, or if not to the 90% level with that original effort. In 2021, some permitting, based on some permitting discussions, DNR came out and determined the ordinary high water mark. And that effectively rendered the initial design of that outlet structure infeasible. The outlet design had an invert elevation below the ordinary high water mark, complicating the permitting process as the DNR informed the city and MSA that a lake level order or a public rights stage would have to be involved. I'm seeing some nodding heads. I think many of you have probably heard a lot of this history over the years. So that complicated the process of the permitting process and forced of what the outlet structure could be, what the elevation might be set at. In 2021, late in 2021, we updated the hydrology, the hydrologic model of the Graber watershed to account for Bell Farm developments and the added impervious associated with the pending Parmenter Street project. Also accounted for some diversion away from Graber Pond based on the Tribeca diversion. So that's kind of, you can see some notes on the left side of that map up there indicating some updated watershed boundaries. So the other thing that came into play in this process was an evaluation or preliminary evaluation of the Misty Valley Road culvert in place. And it appears that that was not designed with the magnitude of overflows that have occurred or had occurred from Graber Pond. So the effect of having that ordinary high water mark set, and that being the new boundary condition for our outlet structure, really coupled with the Misty Valley Road culvert condition, or that being under capacity, really has presented a challenge for achieving any real measurable flood reduction for Graber Pond and the associated properties. So that kind of brings us to, and those events kind of put a halt on the whole Graber Pond outlet structure design process. Some public opposition, and then the lake level public rights stage requirement for the DNR. So kind of putting the history, I guess, aside and looking to the future, the idea was proposed by the city to revisit the Graber Pond outlet, but in a bigger context, and including some of the downstream features and areas between Graber Pond all the way down to Pheasant Branch Road. So that is in looking at this area more holistically and from a watershed level versus one particular project isolated from all the other areas downstream. So the Graber Greenway, and forgive me if this is repetition of information you've heard from the previous presenters, is really Graber Pond and its overflow route through Misty Valley Road culvert, which then continues through, thanks Eric, to the, what I call the Misty Valley Development Stormwater Management Complex, which is a couple infiltration basins, a tension basin. That system overflows and travels, passes through the High Road culvert. That waterway or drainage way continues southeast along an existing alignment before it bends and travels straight east to Pheasant Branch. East of Pheasant Branch Road, it's conservancy land, I believe. So the Graber Greenway starts basically at Graber Pond and travels for the purposes of this discussion and this proposed contract amendment to Pheasant Branch Road. So we've identified, or the city has identified a number of components that would improve stormwater management performance within this greenway, with the goal of reducing pollutant loading and reducing flood risk for the properties along the greenway. So then there's another map, Eric, the next map that shows some labeled polygons. And this is really a map to help you all understand where these components are within the greenway. And so real quickly, I'll kind of run through what the component is, what the issues are, and then what the expected benefits would be to implementing the proposed project component. So again, starting off with number one there, that's a combination of the Graber Pond outlet structure and the Misty Valley Road culvert upgrades. So that effort would entail working with the DNR, figuring out whether the lake level would be established, a lake level order or a public rights stage set, so that we can use that as a boundary condition or continue discussions with them to allow an outlet invert below that level. And then improve the culvert capacity at Misty Valley Road. So the outlet structure and the culvert upgrades in conjunction would be implemented to reduce flood risk at National Electrostatics and then some of the houses along that overflow path just upstream of Misty Valley Road. The second component is the Misty Valley Stormwater Complex. So we would be evaluating the performance of that system, that complex, as a whole to see if it is still providing the stormwater management that it was designed to provide and was stipulated under the stormwater management plan that led to the permitting for it. So there's an infiltration, the specifics of that number two, component number two, the city has asked MSA to examine there's an infiltration basin that doesn't appear to be infiltrating per the original design. So we'd be doing some test pits within that to evaluate the soils and see if there is, in fact, if the infiltration is being limited. That long kind of narrow band on the north side follows the Bellefontaine Boulevard ditch in between the boulevard and the bike path south of it. We'd like to explore the possibility of converting some of that ditch area into stormwater management features that would infiltrate.
Let me interject something. So Bellefontaine was designed as a 4-lane boulevard. We no longer think we need 2 of the lanes. Right now it exists as kind of a deeper ditch that's flowing to the east, but the idea would be to see if we can enhance that, take some credit for infiltration that we could provide in that spot.
It is all city right away right now.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So kind of to Eric's point, the overriding goal of this proposed amendment is to increase stormwater management performance throughout the greenway. Pollutant load reduction, flood risk, flow attenuation, and flood risk reduction. So trying to eke out or increase some more infiltration that's happening to reduce volumes that are ultimately arriving downstream. Another component of that Misty Valley complex evaluation would be evaluating if the existing there's an existing basin that could potentially be converted to a bioretention basin, which would improve stormwater management performance, TSS, phosphorus reduction. Another component is evaluating the costs associated with conversion of a lot of that turf grass area back into native vegetation to improve habitat for wildlife species and just kind of the aesthetic for the neighborhood. That would likely involve the city has a consultant that does a lot of restoration work in incorporating into that. But our role would be identifying where the extents are of that turf grass that we think could be converted.
Question. I should know this. I'll express my ignorance. Is number 2 area, is that all municipally owned stormwater facilities, or is there some of that private? That's all city owned?
It's all municipal.
Okay.
Sure. The last little thing is there's an overflow weiring between the infiltration basin and the detention basin that we would take a quick look at to make sure that's in good shape. So the general idea is to kind of assess what the current performance is and how much better it could be performing with some improvements or conversions of basin types. That, as I said, that complex outlets to the High Road culvert. It's believed that the High Road culvert is likely undersized. It does not have adequate capacity, and it's also viewed as a barrier to aquatic organism passage or a hindrance. So component number 3 would be evaluating the culvert capacity there and identifying and vetting alternatives for upsizing that to meet capacity requirements, as well as improving aquatic organism passage.
And
Go
that
ahead.
will take into consideration the development on Ziegler Farm.
Yep. Most everything
All of this,
here will have to account for Ziegler Farm and Red Tail Ridge.
Yep.
So moving to number 4, that's High Road. Future improvements are planned for High Road to convert it from its current rural cross section with roadside ditches to an urban cross section with curb and gutter. So this would be really similar to what's happening or coming with Parmenter Street. I don't know, Eric, if there would be expansion or widening with any medians. I don't think so. I think it's just simply adding curb and gutter. So our effort for this would be identifying what stormwater management requirements are in play, be it county, state, local, and then doing some preliminary modeling to identify potential sites for stormwater management features. Similar to Parmenter, we've proposed some linear basins on the side of the road to meet stormwater management requirements. So we'd be trying to identify space for features and doing some preliminary modeling to figure out what would be needed to meet some requirements. So that effort would just be preliminary. There wouldn't be any design work associated with that because that would all be under a different project. And it's assumed that High Road culvert improvements would also be wrapped up in another component or project. Jim, did you have a question?
Is there a reason why that analysis of High Road drainage and expansion, all that stops at Bellefontaine, not up to Greenbrier? Is there?
That might just be my ignorance of the extent of the road.
It should go up to Greenbrier.
All right.
And you know, so none of these. We need to improve the road. Some of the
Yeah.
projects, we
Yeah.
have money in escrow, you know, Ziegler's not gonna do it, Red Tail's not gonna do it. We'll need to do some water quality treatment, I think. Beyond that, I'm not sure, but we're really hemmed in. It's not like Parmenter Street. We don't have as much width. So we're gonna have to find opportunities, and if, you know, if we can kind of with an improvement to Spring Hill Pond, that might work. You know, the problem is the downstream side is wetland. That's the intent. They would take it through a concept analysis, I guess, and, you know, NSA, who knows, may end up doing a road project, but that's not under this contract. But
So that brings us to that wetland shown in the middle polygon labeled with the label number 5, just to the east of High Road. I think this was discussed in the previous presentation. So the idea here would be to enhance and restore the existing wetland there. There's some adjacent areas that are reverting, or not reverting, but are being used for agricultural purposes. We have to be careful that it's not proposing to expand them, but to restore and enhance what's there. And the idea is trying to implement some grading practices, sometimes known as a wetland scrape, to try to increase the volume available there, to attenuate some flow and allow a little bit more sediment settling to improve water quality. You'll note that there are a couple of larger number 5 polygons. These represent areas from the Ziegler Farm and the Red Tail Hawk development that will be draining or outletting to this wetland. So to your earlier comment, Lisa, the expectation is that there'll be additional volume coming into this wetland area. And if we can make some improvements and enhancements to that wetland area to accommodate some of that increased volume, that would be the goal. As the greenway flows, excuse me. Sorry about that. Flows out of the wetland and moves to the southeast, where it forms kind of enters into the map, or the mapped waterway realm, if you will. The Friends of Pheasant Branch have identified a nick point in the creek, or a head cut. So what's happening is there's the channel bed is lowering, creating a grade break, if you will, along that channel profile. And as it lowers, it allows bank material to slough in and be carried away. Bank material is likely laden with phosphorus from past agricultural activities. But in conjunction with number 5, or component number 5, we would address that head cut so that it can't continue to propagate all the way back up to High Road. We want to arrest that and put a grade control feature there, so that we're not watching this head cut propagate up, and then we're looking at a new culvert at High Road suddenly becoming perched at its outlet end. And again, creating challenges to aquatic organism passage. So 5 and 6 would kind of be done in conjunction. Heading east from number 6, the channel enters into, or the waterway enters into a ditched portion where it's been straightened. Actually, I think it's not ditched initially until about halfway to Pheasant Branch Road, and that's where the ditch section starts. And that is what, or component number 7, where we would propose trying to reconnect that channel to the surrounding floodplain. The western half of that east-west stretch is severely incised due to that head cut, so there's large grade separating the bed of the channel with the surrounding floodplain, so it's the flows in the channel are only able to access that floodplain and widen out and lose that energy under the largest of events. And then the ditched portion, the second half or the downstream half of that east-west portion is it's ditched, and some of the spoils from that past ditching activity have raised the bank height. So again, that flow is not able to access that floodplain area as often as it now normally would. So this component number 7 would be to reconnect that, reestablish that floodplain connection between the low flow channel and the floodplain area. And that would entail a combination of grading of the banks and perhaps adjusting the profile when it's severely incised. So that is a quick kind of run through of the 7 components that the city has asked MSA to examine and include in this Greater Greenway improvement proposal. Again, the big picture here is I've kind of separated these out a la carte style to a degree to help folks get a handle on costs and level of efforts of each, but they're all interrelated, right? You can't separate what's happening in the upstream from the downstream. And that's kind of the approach for having these different components included in the Greenway, and that would be that'd be the message for the permitting discussions with the regulators. While there may be impacts to individual components, we'd be looking to stress the net benefit to the greater Greenway and watershed area, and as well as the downstream receiving waters.
I'm pleased that we're looking at this thing as a whole system, not, we've been chipping away at chunks of it for 7 years now or something like that. And I also saw you did have scope in there for a meeting with stakeholder groups, Fresh Friends of Pheasant Branch, which sure is a good idea.
And that'll take place throughout, correct? It was phase 800, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean you wait until the first 7 are done.
Right.
That's just a separate.
800 was just not that's going to be the
Yep.
8th step in the process, but just a summary to make sure folks get a handle on the number of meetings. It gets I felt it got a little confusing in my scope, trying to figure out which component's going to have a meeting and which one isn't. And I've tried to, a lot of these things like, Graber Outlet and a number of these components can be met on and discussed at the single meeting, but at some point, there's probably going to be too much to get through in one meeting. So I said, okay, these couple of components go together. Same with the bidding, right? The idea is that the more components that could be wrapped up and bid together in a single plan set, a single permit application package, there's economies of scale that can be realized to reduce the overall costs. But again, it's hard at this stage to know what the city might ultimately want to do. They're going to pick and choose certain things. I do think that the component 7, the floodplain, I've kind of kept that as a separate thing. Separate bidding process, the floodplain reconnection effort.
Jeff, what are you gonna use for flows? If you're gonna discharge from Graber Pond, what are you gonna use to evaluate all these different aspects?
Well,
It seems like Graber Pond has to start there. We have to have an operation plan for Graber Pond.
Correct.
Stumbled over that for the past 10 years.
That's Yes,
Number one, how are we gonna operate Graver Pond?
set those boundary conditions, right?
Well, how are we gonna operate the pond? Are we gonna, as a great pothole or a storage facility or past the inflow?
Well, that's to be determined. There's gonna be input from the regulatory agencies, there's gonna be input from stakeholders, there's gonna be input from what the city. If we go back, way back, to the first design, there was an active management of that pond level, right? There was valves that could be open and closed. And the city at that point
Sort of.
wasn't interested in that type of management or
Yeah.
day-to-day maintenance.
So how are you gonna address, you have to do that first. How are you gonna address that issue?
Well, I think that the first step in all this is figuring out what line the DNR is gonna draw. Are they gonna say, well, you're never gonna have an invert of that outlet allowed below the ordinary high water mark? Or if they're gonna allow a reduction or an outlet that's below that ordinary high water mark. Because that serves as the boundary condition. If you can put that invert elevation below the ordinary high water mark, you're creating some head available for bounce during flood events before it would overflow. If you're set right at that ordinary high water mark, if the pond level stays up at or near that ordinary high water mark, you're getting little to no flow attenuation and storage from that Graver Pond. But until we work through the process with the DNR, it's hard to tell what exactly it's gonna
Don't you think we should make a recommendation what we want to start with?
Well,
We want it as a storage facility?
we can't dictate.
It is
what
a
DNR is gonna do.
No, but we could recommend that we would like to consider this as a storage facility.
It's a storage facility, no matter what we recommend. I mean,
To a certain extent.
yeah,
If it's at the level of the invert, you can't have you draw it down a foot or two, you get more storage.
right.
And shouldn't we go to DNR with a plan that we think is
Well, I think
desirable?
that's what this proposal is doing.
Okay, that was the question. And what are we gonna do for flow values? Are you look at studies you did before on discharge values?
Well, yeah, we've got a watershed, the hydrology of the watershed model. So we have an idea of what comes into the pond. And
Are you
then
gonna update that model you did before?
I don't envision there'll need to be much updating because I don't think much has changed, if anything, in the watershed, the Graver Pond watershed from our last round. We accounted for Bell Farm, we accounted for the Tribeca diversion, and we accounted for the Parmenter Street improvements. Now I don't know if, well, sorry, let me back up. Now it sounds like there's Ziegler Pond development, so we'd have to update for that, right? Because they've got a watershed break on the southwest side, where they're gonna have some going to Graver and some continuing east.
I can't remember your model before. Was it a daily stream flow model or vent model?
It was a HydroCAD model, so I don't know if I'm following the question.
Event versus continuous simulation.
Event,
Yeah,
It was not continuous.
I don't believe so.
I don't think so either.
discrete events.
Yeah, that's correct.
Mhm.
It was just an event-based,
So they took the two-year event and the 5 and the 10-year event and routed it through.
Right.
Will your phase 100, the Graver Pond outlet structure, okay, so I'll take into account what's happening with the Ziegler Farm development. One of the things that has been proposed is eliminating the boardwalk on Graver Pond, which especially if there's going to be changes in the level of the pond. We don't want the boardwalk getting flooded, but there is talk of replacing that with a path that would go along the eastern shore of Graver Pond on what used to be Ziegler Farm and is now the development. Go ahead, yeah.
I don't know if that will work. We took a look at some of the grading and what stormwater that they have for Ziegler. And we are weighed heavily weighed in on that of a path behind those lots. And with that grade, we don't think, or they recommended that some would not go in there as a path. So they're not seeing a path forward with a path there.
Mark, hope it's in the room.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know. What am I doing? I don't
Save
wanna
that
be
one
like
up,
that.
Kylie.
No.
Hold on to that one.
Bad. Okay.
Well, that's concerning because if we use Graber Pond for storage, it's as high as it can go and maintain that. I mean, already the boardwalk is not underwater. Well, it is.
In times,
Yeah,
That boardwalk is in pretty bad, or like, I don't know, the condition of it is not well, so
yeah.
it has to be replaced, and there are other options for how things would sit with water level, like how we would construct or design that, but it's a big expense.
And then also, I'm gonna ask. Your map, you can update where it says town of Middleton and town of Springfield. It's all the Ziegler land is now in the city of Middleton. We've annexed that, so that's good.
Okay.
And then Parmenter Street, is it being widened? It is. Is it not still being discussed what that final plan is going to look like? I thought there was a need to.
Pretty guaranteed. The only real problem was the small car dealership there. It was just a small area that was under concern, and I think they've gotten around that now. As far as I know, at least based on the last Public Works Committee meeting I was at. So it's yes, it's being widened.
Okay. And then finally, on page 220, it indicates that the purpose of all this work is to reduce the flood risk within the Graber Greenway. And I think it's important, and you've said it, but I think it's important to note in the document that it's also to reduce flood risk downstream, not just in the Greenway itself. And I note that the recommended action tonight is to recommend approval subject to identification of a funding source.
Right.
Is this the potential?
So we have $500,000 in federal earmark money that's been promised, but there's no federal budget yet. You know, it was supposed to come through about now. I think last we heard they were thinking about January. I don't know if the change in administration would affect that. But that's my intent
Iffy anyway.
of funding this would be that money. You know, stormwater utility is also certainly an option at your discretion. Fees in lieu, you could think about, you know, this is,
And use capital fund for this.
I don't think anybody would be on board with that.
Not if there's another source.
Is there, I just want to be clear on the deliverables. It looks like you're gonna produce construction plans for some of these phases. Outlet is supposed to be a biddable document that we're talking about.
I think we were talking about two different projects, perhaps,
Yeah.
biddable projects.
It would be basically Graber outlet with Misty Valley. Culvert upgrades,
Culvert, okay.
and then the wetland enhancement number 5, component 5, together with the head cut
Head cutting.
arresting
That's what I see.
is number 6. So that would be one package. So the Misty Valley Stormwater Management complex evaluation wouldn't involve any design plans or anything. It would be the deliverable there would be a summary report saying, here's what the current features get for stormwater management performance. If you implement A, B, C, D, E, here's what each one will get in a cumulative. High Road is preliminary upgrade to be accompanied with High Road reconstruction. The High Road stormwater would again be memo summarizing, here are the requirements, here are proposed locations that get you this much treatment. So from a construction plan bidding thing, we have, angle. We've got Graber, Misty Valley Pond, wetland restoration, head cut as one
And
bidding package, and then number 7, the floodplain reconnection as a separate one. But again,
okay,
bundling together
yeah.
allows for some efficiencies.
And what's the timeline? Because High Road reconstruction right now is in the budget for 26.
Honestly, the timeline for any of this was never
Okay.
completed.
I think we joked about,
I don't recall.
I said right away.
ASAP.
To answer your question, I think this is all feasible in 2025 ahead of happening in
And High Road
2026.
design would be 2025.
Thanks. One more question. So going back to the slide that showed all the 5, 7, 4, all the components. So the delineated wetland, I see, it's got a straight edge right where the property boundary for the Ziegler's development is.
On the lower right.
Yep, lower right. And that polygon underneath it, north of the path, is the one in question that, there's got to be a way for the city to acquire that. But there was a plan in place, but it didn't work out. So anyway, is it possible for your phase 7 to make a recommendation regarding the benefit to the city of acquiring and bringing that land into the Graber Greenway? Because it seems to me like the Greenway itself should consist of the city's path and the unfortunately named Pheasant Branch Ridge Drainage Way, which I keep trying to want to rename that one. But that parcel and the path, I think you can see it on this. Oh yeah, there it is. So all those houses on the north side of Whittlesey Road, their backyards abut a big ditch, and then there's the path. And then there's the drainage basin. But it seems like that should all be part of the Graber Greenway, no?
Makes sense.
Yep, certainly could be. I think that.
I think you mentioned in your text an analysis of those ponds.
Yeah, Great or Pheasant Branch Ridge East and West are 2 ponds that back in 2016 we evaluated to see if they could be retrofit
Yeah.
to improve stormwater management.
I'll see this.
Somehow
I'll see it.
Everything from that
That's a
bike
branch
path
development
north
phase,
is
I'll
wet.
see.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah,
This
it's
is
all
value
continuous,
on this,
contiguous wetland. I think there's maybe is there another drainage that comes in from the south into the main channel?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
There's one here, I believe.
So we could certainly look at,
One over here.
What I'm getting at is if we can get a recommendation regarding the potential value of the city acquiring that parcel and doing something with it, not making it a more robust stormwater facility, that could help convince council to put that in the budget.
evaluate the benefits of
Acquiring that land.
acquiring
City
that.
property.
Episode. I wasn't aware that something had fallen through.
Well, that happened a long time ago.
Yeah.
Well,
Are we talking about the same thing?
Can someone help me
Tell
by
you
like
later.
outlining exactly? where-
We're talking about this parcel.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think that would be.
it's an outlet that was not dedicated to the city,
Right.
but
It's in the city.
it's in the
In the
city,
city,
yeah.
right? But like the drainage. Well, the path that property was an outlet and it was dedicated. And for some reason, the plat doesn't show any dedication on this.
North of that.
Yeah,
They went defunct before they developed.
Somebody's paying property tax on that.
Or
No, there's no property.
It's zero
it had
value.
not been taxed because, yeah,
For some reason, it was set to 0.
Right.
So nobody has noticed for.
Yeah, it's an outlot,
decades.
not a field, an outlot, but it's zero value.
So what are we looking for tonight, Eric?
I think we're looking for a motion to recommend approval of a contract amendment with MSA for the Graber Tiedemann Ponds Flood Elevation Control Studies for Graber Greenway Project, PW 19-120B. Subject, recommending that to the Finance and Personnel Committee, subject to identification of a funding source.
Which is a funding question.
143,887.
50 grand. You know, this is a very detailed proposal for a very shape shifting, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Lisa, was that?
Was that a
That was a motion. I was waiting for a second.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Oh,
We have a motion and a second.
Yes.
All in favor?
It's understood as presented in this document, something like that. So it's not like
Yes,
just whatever. Aye.
aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
We call that 7-0.
Can we do all this without a continuous flow model, just event models?
I think that's up to you. There's, I mean, I think there are different things they gotta look at. Some of them are just peak flows and then some of them are, how does this behave? Under normal conditions or under wet conditions, dry conditions.
But if they do that, that's a scope changes.
That's scope change and it's a lot more money.
Yeah.
So next item of business, and did we knock this one off or we have this one?
If you wanna keep going,
I was gonna say, members, if someone were to make a motion to defer these items to our next meeting, would I get a second?
Second.
I have a question, is it gonna slow it down? It's getting it done.
These two projects, Spring Hill and.
Waiting a month.
They've
If we defer.
they've already been deferred
No.
for 2 years.
yeah,
Which is why I'm asking.
yeah, there's no big decisions on those two projects for you guys. The intent would be to bid them, you know, January or February, so yeah, we gotta look at them in December.
Yeah.
They'll also be asking for a small contract amendment because the projects have been dragging on,
Yeah.
Okay.
not their fault.
Okay, so motion, all in favor of the items back to next time?
Which items?
The remaining
5 through
agenda
8.
items.
5 through 8?
Yeah.
I got, is there a motion?
Yes,
Yes, and there's a second.
Who's the first?
I moved and Don seconded.
All in favor?
I,
Opposed? Who wants to state your?
I live here now.
and so.
Concentration levels.
And so I probably should have put this in my motion, but we are meeting on the 18th of December, correct? Yep, it's on my calendar. You'll be gone?
Oh, my God.
You'll be virtual? You'll be virtual?
From a plane.
You'll be here?
I'll be.
Yeah, okay. Great.
Warren? One last step.
Oh, means adjourned.
Thank you.
Now you're gonna vote.
Thank you.
Not that this.